all of the money in football is being redirected into players. The proportion of finances that either go into player transfers or player wages is disproportionate to the revenue that clubs generate. Clubs are not really hugely profitable entities, and the reasons why there is a demand and need to keep on driving more football matches, more tournament games, and they haven't finished yet. You know, the UEFA have moved up from X amount of teams into a bigger Champions League. FIFA are desiring of a FIFA World Club Championship. They're trying to expand the number of teams that play in the World Cup. Next, they'll try and expand.
We're talking about World Cup every 2 years, talking about Euros every 2 years.
And with all that, and behind all of that is economics. Now, what people will say that are not balanced in their view, it's greed. But where does this greed land? Where does the real greed land? It lands in the pockets of agents, players and managers. And if you scale that back, then you start to decompel the argument about how many games need to be played. Because if you look at it and say, if 75, with the exception of a few clubs in the Premier League, most clubs are running at 70% to 80% of their turnover on wages, or player wages, not other things, just player wages. How can that be a sustainable model? And the only reason that more games are being played is for that. Now, with Lewandowski's observation, it's great, but you're being made a multi-millionaire from kicking a bag of wind around on the basis of the desire for broadcasters to see more football, and that's what's put you in a wonderful position of being a multi-millionaire for just being a footballer.
Yeah, but I mean, Lewandowski's saying that quality will be sacrificed soon because it's all about quantity, and he's saying you've got to get into perspective.
Have we seen any evidence of that? Right. A, we've got bigger squads than we've had before. B, we've got more substitutes. C, you've got better technological advances. Right. You know, the fact of the matter is that the depth of squads, with the more revenue that you generate, you should be able to have a stronger squad of players. So if you look at Manchester City's squad, for example, some people were saying, some people that were ridiculously wrong, like Rio Ferdinand, that he could actually put out the second-string Man City side and win the Champions League final with their B side. Right? So if you've got a squad of players, if you're playing in the Champions League, then you are a side that's relatively compelling and successful. So you'll have the ability to be able to have a group of players that are able to play in these. And I'm a bit tired of this narrative. I don't dispute the fact that you should listen to people and take on board what they're saying, but by the same token, you can't have it always but up. Football is driven by economics. Players are taking all the money. The sport is not.
Yeah, but the players are doing all the playing. I know that sounds pretty damn remarkable.
Yeah.
But I mean, look at what they're trying to do, Simon. An expanded Champions League, a major tournament every year.
Yep.
Look at what we just reported. Mason Greenwood withdrawing this morning.
Yep.
Underlying injury problem.
Yep.
You can forget the Euros.
But that happens, isn't it?
Yeah, but all of a sudden, this is getting thrown at them.
But we all listened to the lot of old cobblers at the beginning of the season that would have more injuries this season. And that hasn't proven to be the case. Because if you look at the actual facts, rather than the nonsense that we were led to believe was going to be the situation at the beginning of the season, actually there's been less injuries during the course of this season than there is in a traditional season.
But we are getting towards a saturation point, Sam. There can be no doubt.
I don't disagree. But then what is the reason behind the saturation point? Let's look at the reason behind it. Is somebody getting rich? I mean, let's don't forget, Ceferin is the saviour of football, isn't he? He's the one that saved football, while simultaneously ramping up the amount of games that players have. For what reason?
Yeah, but
more revenue, more power, more influence.
Owners and chairmen are getting rich too.
Who? Which owners and which chairmen are getting particularly rich right now? The football world is on its backside. You quite happily 2 months ago were suggesting that the biggest club in the world was skint, Barcelona, about to go into meltdown. Who is it that currently is getting rich out of football? Who's had a reset? Everybody else has had a reset. The broadcasters have had a reset. The football framework's had a reset. The only people that haven't had a reset is the players. If we get the balance right between the economics of football, put proper governance in place, that means that football controls its economics and that player salaries are put back into line, then maybe we'd have a different argument to say, stop this bleeding narrative of games. So
what are you saying? Are you saying this morning that if the players take a pay cut, we can cope with this expanded Champions League. We can cope with more football, or we can't.
It's not as simple as that. It is a case of why are we having more football? Because one, it defeats the argument. If you're suggesting that there's going to be less demand for it, well, that less demand isn't there because there's more demand. It's being consumed more and more by broadcasters, so the demand isn't there. Then the argument about quality. That's an excuse. You've got 25, on the whole, in the best clubs in the world, world-class players that should be able to rotate and be in and amongst games. They're playing far less games than they were playing 25, 30 years ago, on far better services, with far better technical advantages, with far more money. And all of these things come into the mix to say, this is why we end up where we are. And it's an excuse from players at times. And Gundogan was sat there a month ago saying, we should be consulted. Well, people can't consult you, Gundogan, because they're too busy running around trying to work out how they're bleeding more going to afford your wages.
You're not going to be shifted on that, are you?
I'm afraid I'm not.
And only certain squads, incidentally, Simon, have got 25 quality elite
Champions
players.
League teams, on the whole, have the best players available because they happen to be the champions or not.
Okay.
Because most of the teams in the Champions League, of course, aren't champions.
We'll come back to this. This isn't done yet.
Jim White and Simon Jordan. Monday to Thursday morning, 10 till 1. On AM, on DAB, via the talkSPORT app and on your smart speaker. talkSPORT.